T minus 20 seconds. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back. It is once again time for Out of the Tunnel on a beautiful fall Saturday. We have a action-packed show for you guys today. We have a lot to get through. Our FanDuel accounts are full. Our podcast is full, so let's get into it. Nick, let's start over to you. Let's get the day started.
Yeah, so relatively simple question here, but I think it could cause a little controversy. Do you guys think that Bama is in danger of missing the playoffs for the first time since 2017, 19? One of them odd numbers.
You want me to go
Georgia's first.
All right, so I think that Bama is possibly in danger. I think it all depends on what Georgia and Tennessee do here midseason when they play their game.
I know.
Um,
Watch it.
but yeah, I think that I think it's going to be hard for two SEC teams and two Big Ten teams to make it into the playoffs this year. I think that right now, I think there's like 11 undefeated teams as of the start of this weekend. So it's just going to be really difficult for Bama to be able to sneak in there with one loss unless they're able to beat Georgia in the SEC championship.
Yeah, I agree with you. While we give George a second here, I think his internet here might be trying to come back. Yeah, so there he is. He's moving now. I think that I think that Bama has a very good opportunity to run the table, win the rest of the regular season games. But you still have the SEC championship, and depending on how things go, they're going to be facing either Georgia or Tennessee again. And while their first game with Tennessee was close, I think that that it could have been a lot farther separated as far as Tennessee goes. Tennessee missed some plays, and I don't think that Bama is good enough to beat either one of those teams in the SEC championship. So I think that's going to play a huge factor and come down to, obviously college football. We've seen it plenty of times this season. Anything can happen, but as far as the way they've looked and the way Tennessee and Georgia have looked, I don't see them beating them, either one of them, if they play in the SEC championship. So I see Bama missing the playoffs.
Yeah, I mean, I missed most of what both of you said, but I think it is a very difficult road for Alabama to get to the playoffs. I mean, it's not impossible. We've seen Alabama do this before. Last year, they lost to Texas A&M in what they called a rebuilding year. They turned around and they ended up into the championship game. I think as far as making the playoffs this year, though, I think it's a much more difficult road. I do believe, though, this could be the first year we possibly see a two-loss team get into the playoffs. But with Alabama's remaining schedule, they have a very difficult Mississippi State team today at home. It's coming off a tough loss, so is Alabama. LSU, they travel there on November 5th, and then they also travel to Ole Miss on November 14th. Excuse me, November 12th. And then, like you just said, they still have the SEC championship game where they'll either most likely play Georgia or Tennessee. We've already seen what Tennessee can do to them, and Georgia's going to be much of the same, in my opinion, just because they have way too many concerns on defense for me. I mean, we saw that exploited in the secondary, and their refusal to make any adjustment at all to cover Jalen Hyatt. So, is it impossible? No. I do feel like this is a more difficult road than Alabama has had in the past to get to even just the SEC championship. If they lose another game and say LSU or can't think of the name, Ole Miss wins out, they will be able to get into the SEC championship game. So it's definitely a more difficult road this season, more so than we see in the past. But I don't think it's impossible. But to answer the question, they are absolutely in danger of missing the playoffs this year. Sure. All right, Saeed, let's go to you and let's get your headline for today.
Yeah, so mine is the fact that last week we saw Tennessee down Bama, like you guys had kind of prefaced there. after the game, fans, everyone rushed the field. It's an SEC rule that if the fans go on the field, the school was fined $100,000. Shortly after that, the goalpost ended up in the river. One was at the top of the stadium. It looked almost as if they had plans to chuck it over the top, maybe hit a car or something like that. No clue. They were definitely fired up. But the one that left the stadium, they put out a Twitter post and said like, "Hey, it came to our attention that if we want to play our game next week, we kind of need goalposts in the stadium, and for that, we're asking that people donate to pay for the goalposts." I hope that it was a joke, but they put out like actual collection ways of going about it. Um, One of the ways was you could give $16 for the amount of seasons that it was since the Vols beat Bama. You could give 52-49, which was the final score of the breathtaking game, or you could give $1,000 19 cent or 1,019 with 15 cents, which is the capacity that was sold out at their stadium. Um, I I thought that it was a joke at first, and then there was actually, like, people donating and stuff. I just think it's crazy that this school that has, like, $250 million endowment, they're worth, like, $1.3 billion. They're asking these fans that have waited 16 years for Bama to come there and for them to be able to get a statement win like that, that realistically, they could not win for another 16 years, and they'll use it as bragging rights, which they should.
Mhm.
But I just think it's crazy that they're asking their fans to pay for goalposts that for a school that brings in $250 million a year to go towards their sports teams.
Yeah. So in total, the Tennessee fans raised $200,000 for not just the goalpost, but to also pay the fine that the SEC hands down when you have anybody either rush the field, storm the court in basketball, anything, which I think is the dumbest rule in sports.
Yeah,
It's just another way for the SEC to get money. It keeps the I understand SEC fan bases are still passionate, but I feel like it just takes a lot off of the game. I mean, last year we saw Texas A&M storming the field. Um, Storming the field in college football and college basketball too is what makes college sports so much more fun. And to fine people for that is, I think, absurd. Is it a little cheap for Tennessee to look to their fans when I know they have the money for it? They were encouraging fans before the game, say, "Hey, if we win, go ahead, storm the field, whatever." You knew what was coming. You can't tell me you didn't know beforehand. Oh, the goalposts are probably going to get torn down. Um, so yeah, I do think it's a little cheap on them, but it is what it is. On the bright side, though, another good thing that came out of this story is they're playing University of Tennessee Martin this week, which is not an FBS school, but one of their players' families was devastated by Hurricane Ian. So UT Martin reached out and said, "Hey, I mean, you guys raised all this money for your own school. Like, can you help out like this kid in actual need?" And they raised $60,000 for his family as well, which is very good to hear. Um, the Tennessee fan base is definitely a good one. And so I'm glad they got their moment in the sun. Hopefully their season continues, but it's also nice to see them willing to reach out and help out, their opponent this week, which is very cool to see. Nick, you got anything?
yeah. I'm right there with you guys as far as like, yeah, it sounds really cheap to ask your fans that, um, but at the same time, like, I don't know if they intentionally like kind of like you, Slade. It might have started as a joke, and they created a GoFundMe or whatever, and because I'm sure, especially um, encouraging the fans to storm the field if they won before the game even started. Like I'm sure they had an idea, like, okay, well, we're about to get $100,000 fine, and who knows, what else? They had people ripping up part of the field, like, I'm
That's the
sure.
only person that should be paying a fine is that lady with
Yeah,
the duffel bag,
yeah, right.
filling it with
Uh,
dirt.
And then she turned around and she sold it on eBay too.
Yeah.
I don't
yeah,
know if you guys saw that, but
um, just wild. Like, so I think they might not have been as serious with it, but it's
I,
huge. Go ahead, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, like, I know they had the money to begin with, but I'd like to see them take either the money that was donated to them. Let's put it in an NIL fund. Let's spend it on some other athletics that definitely need it. Um, so that's all I was gonna say. I would just like to see. I know they had the money. Let's take that and let's put it somewhere else. Let's do something good with the money on top
Yeah,
of
Well, here's the thing. They came out a week before the game and said and were bragging that they just got new goalposts, that it was time to upgrade, they got new goalposts. And
they
then
ordered them. Yeah.
if you watch the video of the refs trying to book it out of there as soon as that field goal was given the go ahead, if they show you the other view, there's a guy taking the Vols pad off the bottom of the goalpost, knowing damn well what's about to happen.
Oh
Like,
yeah.
he takes it off and then runs into the tunnel. Like, I don't
I think they knew
understand.
that the goalposts were gonna get ripped down. I didn't think they were.
But they sent a guy out there at the end of
But
the
no,
4th
what I'm
quarter to
saying is I
cool
don't
his
think they
pads
thought
off.
anybody would carry the goalpost out of the stadium and just
Yeah,
throw it in
out to
the
the
river.
river. Yeah.
Yeah.
And once they realized that happened, they stopped the other goalposts from leaving. Like, there's videos of, like, guys getting tased because they're carrying the goalposts. They're like, "No, we already lost one. We don't need
They were
Yeah.
carrying it up the stadium like they were trying
Yeah.
to throw it out the top.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, it's great to see that the Tennessee fan base stepped up and said, you know what, yeah, we'll donate, and raised, what did you say, like 200,000 or something like that?
Yeah, 200,000 for the school.
Yeah, which is incredible. Like, and like you said, I hope that they do something good with that. You know, obviously, you could say, oh, we put it towards the goalpost and fixing that little section of field that that fat lady chunked up. You know, or you could just say, well, we paid the fine, we paid for the goalpost, and that money's going to go towards whatever. Like, either way, um, it was cool to see the Tennessee community do that, especially considering I think they're on the right track. I don't know if it's going to be another 16 years before they, beat Bama, but it's always good to savor a moment like that.
Yeah. Usually it's over when the fat lady sings. Apparently it's over when the fat lady rips up the field now.
Yeah, when the fat lady rips the field up.
Uh,
Uh,
moving on, the college football playoff rankings will come out not this week, but the following week. But I wanted to get your guys' thoughts on if the playoffs started today. This isn't who you think is going to make it at the end of the season. This is if the playoffs started today, who would be your first four in, your next two out, and so on. So Nick, let's go to you first. Who would be your playoff games right now if the playoffs started today?
yeah, so my top four, I have Georgia, Tennessee, Michigan, Ohio State, and then my first two out would be Clemson, Bama. So obviously it would be Georgia and Ohio State, and Tennessee and Michigan playing. I put Tennessee up just because I haven't, like, Tennessee just beat a really good Alabama team. Yeah, they're not as good as what we're used to seeing out of Bama, but again, I think it should have been a higher spread. They missed some plays. Um, I have no hate against Michigan or Ohio State. I just think that they haven't played a team, like Bama yet to prove that they belong up there. They've played good teams. And then I put Michigan above Ohio State just because watching that run game and watching the way that line blocks, if you can do that consistently week in and week out, you're going to win a lot of football games. You're going to, make it difficult on your opponent. If your defense is out there, just say like the Penn State game, they were winded by halftime because they were just on the field constantly. And if you can do that, especially in the playoffs with a good defensive team, you're going to make a lot out of it. I put Clemson up there at 5, or at my number 5. Still hesitant. We've talked about it multiple times. They've shown flashes of being a playoff worthy team, and then they've shown flashes of, you know, maybe being a 5, 6, 7 seed, or not seed, but ranking. And then I only put Bama up there. I very strongly considered a UCLA or even a TCU, but due to the fact that Bama lost by 3 points, 2 points, whatever it was, to my number 2 team, I decided to keep them up there. But it was definitely that 6 through like 8 spot for me is honestly up for grabs at this point.
Yeah. Slay, let's get your rankings.
Yeah, so I kind of similar, but a little different. So I went with OSU as my number 1, Georgia as my number 2, Tennessee as the 3rd with that big win last weekend over Bama, Michigan at the 4. They had a massive win against Penn State last weekend. I think that it was definitely a possibility in Nick and I's eyes that Michigan was going to win. Obviously, we got to root for Penn State anyway, but I don't think that any of us saw them getting routed like they did last weekend. Especially with the defense that they were able to show previously in the season. They just, like Nick said, um, they were looking for oxygen on the sidelines by halftime. And then I had Bama at 5 because I feel like although your thing was the playoffs start today, I just think that the SEC championship is going to change so much this year. Like if these teams are able to win out, I mean Georgia and Tennessee have to play each other. Um, I think that there's going to be a lot of controversy there with who gets in and who doesn't, depending on the Georgia Tennessee game, and then whoever plays in the SEC championship. And then I put Texas at 6 because Texas is back and Georgia's going to end up with a tattoo one day. But I put them there because, like Nick had said, I think that UCLA or TCU definitely deserve to be at that 6 or 7 spot. but they both have very challenging games this weekend. They could both easily lose this weekend, and so I don't wanna put them in there and then them lose today.
So for my playoff picks, I went with Tennessee at number one. I think had the hardest strength of schedule this year. They played Florida, a ranked team at home. They played Alabama, a ranked team at home, and they won both of those games. Yeah, if they were on the road, it would definitely be a different story. But I think overall, they have just had the more difficult schedule to this point, and they've done incredibly well with that schedule. So that's why I have them at number one. I put Ohio State at number two. Again, yeah, they've had a lackadaisical schedule, you could say, but they have blown out every team. They have left no doubt that they are the best team on paper. If their schedule was a little bit more difficult, I would absolutely have no problem putting them at number one. My main concern with them is I think they only have like 3 or 4 road games this year, which I find a little ridiculous, honestly. But that's the main reason I'm keeping them out of my number one spot for right now. Georgia is my number three team. Again, they've had a pretty difficult schedule. Not, I would say, as difficult as Tennessee, but they've done really well with that schedule. They struggled a little bit against Kent State and Missouri, but other than that, I think this is still a team that can easily challenge for another national championship. And Michigan is my number four team. Again, not the greatest schedule up to this point, but they've played really, really well. Yeah, they struggled, a little bit in their first 2 conference games, but they've still gone out there and win. They've done a great job with that defense and that rush game. This is going to be a great team. I'm super excited for that Ohio State Michigan matchup in a few weeks. I think it's going to be a great game. Number five, I put Clemson. Uh, Kind of contradicting what Nick said. I think they have. I don't really have as many questions as I did a few weeks ago. I still think their defense needs to play a little bit better. They gave up a lot of points late in the game to Florida State last week, let Florida State back in. But I think overall, this is a better team. I don't think they're ready to necessarily quite compete for the national championship just yet, but I still think they're gonna have a great season the rest of the year. They have a very difficult week this week. After that, I believe that it's just kind of skating until the ACC championship game and seeing who they're going to play there. So I have Clemson at my 5 spot, and number 6, I have TCU. Every week, I doubt TCU. They go out and they do great things. So I'm going to stop doing that for a little bit until they prove me wrong. But if they can run the table, go undefeated, they absolutely have a shot at getting into the college football playoff. Big 12 has struggled to do that in the last few years, but just with them being undefeated, the schedule they have played and what they have done with that schedule is the reason I put them in over Alabama, who has played really well at times, but also struggled a lot. Not had the best schedule. Yeah, they played on the road at Texas and Tennessee. Outside of that, they really haven't had any games I'm worth mentioning. And so, just for that fact, I would put TCU over Alabama. So, moving on, we're going to take a quick look at our Jack Wagon Sports Top 25 rankings before we get into our picks for everything today. The number one team in the country is still Ohio State. I can't spell state right, apparently. Georgia is number 2. Alabama 3. Tennessee is 4. A little bit of controversy there. Michigan is 5. Ole Miss is 6. Texas is 7. Syracuse is 8. Clemson is 9. James Madison drops to 10th. Illinois is 11th. ECU is 12th. USC is 13th. Tulane 14th. UCF comes into the rankings at 15th. Mississippi State drops to 16th. Oklahoma State drops 1 spot to 17th. Utah 18th. Air Force 19th. Minnesota falls to 20th. LSU jumps to 21st. UCLA 22nd. Western Kentucky is into the rankings at 23rd. UAB is 24th. And Oregon is at 25th. The teams that dropped out of the rankings this week, Wake Forest, just because of their bye week. Kansas with a tough loss at Oklahoma. Baylor with a loss at West Virginia, and Penn State with a loss at Michigan. So let's go ahead. Let's get into our cash out picks this week. Nick, why don't you go first, buddy?
Yeah, so up first, I have the Kansas State at TCU over 54.5. I think this is going to be a very high-powered offensive game. I'm kind of surprised it was only 54.5. I think that Kansas State's defense might be a little stronger than TCU's, but I also think that TCU has a step up on offense, so I think it's going to even out a little bit. I think it's going to be a straight shootout. It's going to be fun to watch, and the other bet I have is Kansas plus 9.5. Yeah, they've taken some losses. They just lost to Oklahoma, who kind of was trying to get their crap back together after dropping a couple games in a row. And I think that Kansas is still a very good team. Um, I think they're going to end up covering that.
Yeah, I definitely I like the Kansas plus 9.5. I think Baylor's just struggling way too much right now. We just saw them lose on the road to West Virginia last week. This is not the same Baylor team that we saw win the Big 12 championship last year. There was a lot of question marks around that team. Blake Shapen has not played well at all this season, which is very concerning to see. So I definitely think Kansas can hang around, if not get the victory, and then they become bowl eligible. That is definitely something they want to do. Slade, what are your cash out picks this week?
Yeah, so my first one is Syracuse. I think they're at plus 13. Now I think they're at plus 14 for this game against Clemson. I think that Syracuse has a good chance at going into Death Valley and being able to win, but I don't know. The books don't think that. And then the other one that I'm very surprised about is the undefeated 6-0 Ole Miss are underdogs against the 5-2 LSU Tigers. I think that the line has changed to like plus 1.5 at this point, but I still think that LSU being a two-loss team, their one loss being to Florida State at the beginning of the season, and then being routed like 40 to like 15 or 13 by Tennessee a couple weeks ago. Um, I think that Ole Miss would be able to keep it closer with Tennessee than that, and so I think that this is a really good value pick here.
Yeah, I think the Syracuse game is going to be a lot closer than what people think. Even with Clemson playing at their absolute best, they still let opponents kind of keep it close. I think Syracuse is being very underrated. If Schrader can play well today, he definitely keeps Syracuse in that game. With my picks, I'm going to go with UNLV plus 27 at Notre Dame. Uh, Notre Dame's 3 wins to this point are by combined 28 points. They like to let bad teams hang around. UNLV actually has a surprisingly good offense. It's been stifled the last few weeks in their conference play, but I think this is still a very good team. They were actually just ranked in our rankings. I think it was 3 weeks ago now. Um, and we just saw Notre Dame struggle heavily against Stanford last week, a team that did not have an FBS win up to that point. I think UNLV is definitely able to hang around a little bit more as Notre Dame continues to try to figure themselves out. I'm not saying UNLV is going to win, but I'm definitely saying I think they keep it closer than 4 touchdowns.
You can
And
catch all
Miss,
the heat from your family this week.
yeah, uh, and Mississippi State is plus 21. I think that's a little disrespectful to them. They still have one of the best offenses in the SEC. Yeah, it struggled heavily last week against Kentucky. Took them a little bit to get that offense going, but this is an Alabama defense that just got absolutely exposed last week against Tennessee. I don't think Mississippi State's going to put up the same kind of numbers, but I definitely think they're able to put up a lot of points. I think this goes back and forth in my mind, and it's a little bit closer than a 3 touchdown game. So that's why I'm going to take Mississippi State plus 21.
I like that
Uh,
last one.
yeah. Before we get into our upset alert and our picks, let's go ahead and look at our cash out and game pick standings. Slade leads the way with 52 wins and 25 losses, and Nick and I are tied at 48 and 29. As far as cash out picks, Nick is 14 and 10, Slade is 10 and 15, and I am 8 and 16. It was a rough week last week for cash out picks, so hopefully we turn that around. Um, so let's go ahead. Let's get into our upset alerts. Nick, you first.
Yeah, so I had to go with Texas on this one. Now, I want to start this out by saying that I do think that Texas wins this game. But this is they're facing an Oklahoma State team. I'm just double checking here. I believe it's at Oklahoma State.
Yes.
Yeah. So Oklahoma State's at home. They've kind of struggled the past couple weeks. Haven't really played up to where we've kind of seen their ceiling be at this season. I think that with years back, Texas has looked great. I think they might have kind of found their rhythm, but this OK State team, if they are playing up to their potential, is a very dangerous team. This is a team that I thought, just 2-3 weeks ago that could make a run, at the playoffs. Um, Obviously, they've stumbled a little bit, but this is definitely a game that Texas needs to watch out for, especially as they have their hopes, set for, possibly a conference championship run, and even just to try to make it to the end of the season winning out.
Yeah. You always make me laugh with your picks because one week you'll do it off the rankings, and the next week you'll do it off the spread. Uh, you never know what you're going to get with you.
Yeah.
Slade, who's your pick this week?
Yeah, so I went with Clemson at 13-point favorites right now. I think that, like you had agreed with me in that, I think that Clemson has let teams keep it close. I think Syracuse is a very like scary offense, and so I think that they're going to be able to go in here and challenge Clemson. And in my opinion, I think that Syracuse is going to give them their first loss of the season. I've been betting against Clemson since the very beginning, and so eventually they got to lose a game for me.
Yeah. I think the biggest difference in this game for me is the fact it's the noon kickoff game. If this is a night game, I think Clemson would have a big advantage, especially with the environment there. Day games, there's even when the crowd is loud and hyped, I feel like it's just such a different atmosphere from it being nighttime. I think it's the same thing that's going to bite Penn State next weekend with the Ohio State game being a noon kickoff. So I think that's an edge that lets Syracuse keep this a lot closer and possibly even pull up the upset.
11:50, Dabo is going to trip coming down the hill.
It's funny that you text
Right
that
on.
because I watched a video like last week of them doing that, and you see players that like jump at the top of it. I'm like, how do they even still allow this? Like, one person is going to tear an ACL, and it's going to be done. They're never going to do it again.
For my upset alert, I'm actually going with TCU. We just talked about them. I think this is a surprisingly good Kansas State team, one that lost to Tulane earlier in the season. But we've seen how well Tulane has bounced back. They actually lost the following week from upsetting Kansas State. But I think this is going to go back and forth a lot. TCU definitely showed some holes in their offense and defense last week. Oklahoma State was up 3 touchdowns at one point before they were able to make a comeback. Uh, Adrian Martinez has shown that I guess the issue was Nebraska because he has gone out and played really, really well this season. His name's getting talked about for some awards, definitely not the Heisman, but some awards. And so he keeps this offense running. Him and Deuce, I think it's McAllister. I want to say McMahon, but that doesn't sound right. But him and Deuce in the backfield have done a really great job at getting that offense running. And I think, we've seen them win on the road at Oklahoma already. I think winning on the road is definitely a possibility. Moving on, it is time now for our game picks. We're going to get started this week. We have Cincinnati, the number 21 team in the country, visiting SMU. This will be the 12 p.m. game on ESPN. Cincinnati opens as a 3-point favorite. The over-under is set at 60. Nick, who are you going with?
Yeah, so I went with Cincy on this one. They've kind of had a bit of a roller coaster of a season. Not a crazy roller coaster, but, it was kind of in the 20s in the top 25 rankings and then fell. And then I think they peaked back in again for, a week or two and then dropped back out. And now here they are sitting at 21. Definitely still a good team. I think that SMU has the potential to be a really good team, but they're just kind of missing just enough pieces. We've seen with some of their games that, they have highs and lows. And I think that Cincinnati is going to be able to do enough on the road to pull this one out.
Slade?
Yeah, I think that them being on the road is why the spread is at 3 points. I think that they should be able to easily cover this. I think that their team is just really great this season. I think that I think they're 5-1 right now with their one loss being to Arkansas, in a really tough game. So I think that their team is going to definitely be able to get this done against SMU.
I'm going to go with Cincinnati as well. I think SMU does keep it right around that 3 points. It's probably a touchdown game, but I think a lot of players on SMU, and we've already seen they packed in their season. It's become a headline already. So I think that alone is a reason Cincinnati is able to pick up the win. Next game up, taking place in Virginia, we have BYU visiting Liberty. This will be the 3:30 game on ESPNU. BYU opens as a 7-point favorite. The over/under is 58. Nick, who are you going with?
Yeah, so I went with BYU on this one. Every time I doubt them, I am wrong. Every time I support them, I'm wrong. So when I was thinking about this game, I really like Liberty. Sometimes you got to fade yourself, so I went BYU.
Slade?
I went with Liberty here. I think that Liberty has been able to score a lot of touchdowns this season, and for some reason, I think their quarterback is also like their leading rushing touchdown. So I think that he's really able to get it done on the rushing side and from a quarterback perspective. So it'll be interesting to see.
Yeah. BYU is already 0-1 against Catholic schools. I think the Catholic schools just continue to prove that they're better than the Mormons. So I'm going to take Liberty at home. Moving on, we have Boise State visiting Air Force in a Mountain West showdown. Air Force is Air Force is ranked number 19 in the Jack Wagon Sports rankings. This will be 7 p.m. on CBS Sports Network. Air Force opens as a 2-point favorite. The over/under is at 47.5. Nick, who do you got?
Yeah, I went with. Sorry, they're a little out of order here. I went with Air Force. I had to make sure. I thought that was my pick, but I just want to double check before I said anything. Yeah, they run the ball and they run the ball very efficiently. I probably take the under on this game, but I think this is they're going to be able to kind of just power or overpower Boise State, run the ball, tire their defense out, keep their Boise State's offense off the field as much as possible, and end up pulling this out.
Slade?
Yeah, I went with Air Force here also. I think that their team has been very good from the offensive standpoint. I think earlier in the season we had talked about that we thought it was just going to be a run game with them. Was it them against Navy or Army?
Maybe.
But yeah, they're able to get it done from the passing standpoint also. So it'll be interesting to see this game.
I'm going to go with Air Force as well. I think their ground game is just too much. Boise State has had a Jekyll and Hyde kind of season. They looked really good one week. They were down 3 scores last week and then came back and won. Um, you can't let Air Force get that far ahead of you. Their defense is definitely a lot better than some of the other teams Boise State has played so far. And I think with this being at Air Force is kind of the difference maker. So I'm going to take Air Force at home. The next game up, we have Kansas State at TCU. This will be 8 p.m. on Fox Sports 1. TCU opens as a 3.5-point favorite. The over-under is 48.5. The last thing I'll say is, how are you going to put a ranked Big 12 matchup on Fox Sports 1 and not Fox? But that's all I'll say about that. Nick, who you got?
Yeah. So I went with TCU on this one. I've faded TCU for long enough now. I think, like I said earlier, I think this is going to be a great game. I definitely think the over is going to hit, but I gotta like TCU on this. Like I said, they're going to allow points, but it seems like every time they have the ball, they're scoring touchdowns, not field goals, touchdowns. And when you do that, when you can do it consistently and at a high level, it doesn't matter who you play. It's going to be difficult for them to beat you. And kind of like I said earlier, talking about the over under, I don't think that Kansas State has enough to slow down TCU.
Slade?
Yeah, I agree. I think TCU is going to be able to get this done. I think that TCU has been very powerful this season so far, and it'll be interesting to see the game. But I definitely think that they're able to get this done. Like you said, it's crazy that this game is going to be on Fox Sports 1.
Yeah. As for me, I have gone against TCU, I believe, the last 3 weeks now, and they have made me pay the last 3 weeks. So now I'm going to pick them, and they're going to lose. But I think this is going to be a great game. But I think Dugan is just a little too good at quarterback for Kansas State to stop him. They have a great connection with some of the wide receivers. Their rush game could definitely use a step up, but I think they're just a little bit too much for Kansas State, especially at home.
So, quick question, George.
Yeah.
With that, they were your upset alert also. So from a betting perspective, do you bet the upset or do you bet for their game for the ML?
I'll still take the TCU money line. I'm just saying they need to be on upset alert.
Okay.
Next up, we have the whiteout game, which all of us wish we could be at. Slade will be tailgating there. We have Minnesota visiting Penn State. This will be 7:30 p.m. on ABC. Penn State opens as a 5-point favorite. The over/under is at 43. Tanner Morgan will be out for the game. I blanked on his name for a second. Nick, who do you got?
Yeah. Obviously, I'm a fan.
Yeah, I don't even know why I asked.
Yeah, but to be like, even if I wasn't a fan, I do think that Penn State would win this game. Coming off a very tough loss against Michigan, one of two things is going to happen. Either A, we're going to respond, or B, we're going to do what we've done the last 3 seasons with Sean Clifford at quarterback, and we're just going an absolute downhill avalanche slide to end the season. But I do think with Tanner Morgan being out, that's going to relieve some pressure on us. It's a whiteout crowd. Every Penn State fan was upset that this was the whiteout game, but they're still going to be there. They're still going to be drunk. They're still going to be loud. And your backup quarterback's going to be in, and you're going to have to rely on a run game against a run defense that was one of the best in the country, and that is going to be pissed off. They just got absolutely hornswoggled by the Michigan O-line. So I think this is going to be sort of a get-right game for us, which we're going to need because Ohio State comes to town.
Slade, why are you going Penn State?
Yeah, so I'm going with Penn State also. I think that their Morgan being out this week says enough. I think that, like Nick had said, Penn State could go into a hole and just kind of play like they did last week and let a Minnesota team that looked very good at the beginning of the season but should not be good right now score some points on them. But I don't think that they're going to be able to do that with the backup. I also think that, like Nick said, everyone's going to be there. They're going to be loud. They're going to be drunk. It's the whiteout game. It doesn't matter who they're playing.
I really want to pick Minnesota here just because, one, who knows, maybe their situation is just like Penn State's where we all know the backup is better than the starter, and he should be playing. But Minnesota also has the best running game in the country, and we just saw what Michigan did to you guys last week. on the ground game. Ibrahim is definitely that kind of running back. He's up there with Blake Corum. He can definitely gouge Penn State the way Michigan did. But I think Penn State's offense responds this week. I think the environment with it being the whiteout crowd is just a little bit too much. We're gonna try it out. We're gonna all go on Penn State here, and we'll see how it works out. I apologize in advance if it doesn't work out for you guys. Next game up, we have Mississippi State visiting Alabama. This will be 7 p.m. on ESPN. Alabama is a 21-point favorite. The over/under is 61. Nick, who do you got?
Yeah, we talked about this spread being disrespectful, and it is absolutely disrespectful. Maybe they think Bama's going to come out all mad and assert their dominance. I don't think that's the Bama team that we have this year. Maybe 2 years ago Bama would probably do that, but I don't think this is the team for that. However, I still have to go with Bama. I do think that they are the better team over Mississippi State. I just think Mississippi State is too inconsistent and has just a few too many holes to keep up with Alabama. But it's still that spread is disrespectful.
Slade?
If I had to guess, I'm thinking like 10 to 14 points, maybe.
Yeah. Slade?
So I think that the spread is going to end up being what it is. I think that the first quarter, Mississippi State's going to come out and throw like a 60-yard bomb. I mean, he did not play. Mississippi State's quarterback did not play very well last week. He had 1 touchdown, 1 interception. I expected him to throw for 4 touchdowns against Kentucky. I think that they're going to be able to keep it close to halftime. I think Alabama's going to go up a score or two in the third quarter, and then in the fourth quarter, like we've been able to see minus last week and against Texas, I think that they're going to put it on them, and they're just going to go up by 3 scores to end the game.
Yeah. Uh, I'm going to go with Alabama here as well. Slade, I can't believe you're going to speak so disrespectfully to Mike Leach, your hero. I think Alabama is definitely going to be upset from last week, but I think so is Mississippi State. They know that they have a team that could have played much better against Kentucky. I think they want to come out and show how good they really are. With it being in Alabama, especially, I'm going to give the edge to Alabama, but I definitely think Mississippi State keeps it closer than 3 scores. Staying in the SEC, we have Ole Miss visiting LSU. This will be 3:30 on CBS. LSU opens as a 1-point favorite as of right now. The over/under is at 65. Nick, who do you got?
Yeah, this is another game where I think the spread is disrespectful. I don't think that LSU is 1 point better than Ole Miss. I think that this is an Ole Miss team that we thought we were going to see last season. And then Lane Kiffin had to talk about grabbing popcorn before the Bama game, and it kind of all just fell apart then. But I think this is a very good Ole Miss team. And this is kind of, I like the term you used earlier, Jekyll and Hyde LSU team. We've seen their highs and we've seen their lows. Yes, it's at home. But we've seen them lose games this season to a lot less talented teams than Ole Miss. So I have Ole Miss taking this one.
Slade?
Yeah, I agree. I think that Lane Kiffin is just on another level when it comes to these SEC teams minus the Tennessee, Georgia, Alabama. I think that it's not. I mean, I think it's must-watch TV if we were able to see those 4 teams play each other every season. But yeah, I think Ole Miss is able to get it done.
I'm going to go with Ole Miss, but I definitely think this is a game LSU can win. One, it's going to be played in Death Valley, but we've seen Ole Miss really struggle at times the past few weeks. They were losing to Vanderbilt for a whole half before they ended up winning by like 50 some points. They let Auburn hang around that game way too long. Auburn actually started to come back towards the end there. This is an Ole Miss team that can be one of the best in the country, but they can also play like one of the worst in the country. And if they do that for too long against LSU is definitely having their moments at times this year. And if they're having one today, they can definitely put up a couple points on Ole Miss. Ole Miss can fall behind, and I don't know if they're the kind of team that can respond in that environment to get back ahead. So this is absolutely a trouble game for Ole Miss. But as of right now, I'm still going to pick them. If I had to pick a game this week where I think the jinx is going to come in, it would probably be this one. Moving on, we have Texas visiting Oklahoma State. This will be 3:30 on ABC. Texas opens as a 6-point favorite. The over/under is at 60. Nick, who do you got?
Yeah, so I know I put them on my upset alert, but I still do think Texas can win this game. I went with Texas. Like I said, I think that Ewers is back. They're kind of looking better. Their defense has stepped up a little bit here recently, and Oklahoma State has just been on the struggle bus. Now, if this is a game, this is the reason I put Texas on upset alert. If this is a game, if Oklahoma State wants to get right going into the end of the season stretch, It's got to be this game. I think they have the tools to keep up with Texas, but just looking at how both teams have performed recently, Texas has all the momentum on their side. Oklahoma State struggling. They had a big lead. They ended up giving it up and losing. So I think that Texas ends up winning this game.
Yeah, I think if you average the Jack Wagon Sports ranking with the AP ranking for both of them, you're at about the 14-15 ranking. So I think that these teams are very close. With Texas' loss being to Alabama without their starting quarterback for the second half. I think that their team has just looked very good with Quinn back, and so I think that they're able to get the win today.
I I really want to go with Texas just because I do think that in a sense they are back. But in my
What was
mind,
that?
Yeah, hold
yeah,
on now.
Clip that.
I would say for the rest of the season I think they're back.
I'll
But
have to find that for the TikTok later.
no, but in my mind, I jumped on this Oklahoma State bandwagon at the beginning of the season. I need to ride it until the end. I've killed all the other bandwagons I've been on so far this season. So I might as well kill this one off this week. So I'm going to go with Oklahoma State at home. I think this is going to be a great environment. Oklahoma State does have a tendency to respond when they need to. I think that can absolutely happen this week. This is going to be a high scoring shootout. I would absolutely take the over in this. Neither team likes to play a lot of defense. So I'm going to take Oklahoma State at home.
So what would have
Uh,
been the better decision here? I mean, you went with staying on the bandwagon, but what if the jinx would have worked?
I
He
think
says the jinx is going to work for the Ole Miss game.
Yeah, that's he doesn't want to waste
He
it.
knows that we have
my
less
jinx
than
is
a
going to work on
50% jinx rating, so he's like, you know what? I don't want to put two of them in there.
my jinx alone for killing bandwagons is what's going to kill Oklahoma State this week. Moving on, my favorite game of the week. We have UCLA visiting Oregon in a top 10 matchup. This will be 3:30 on Fox. Oregon opens as a 6.5-point favorite. The over/under is at 70.5. Nick, who are you going to take?
Yeah, so I wanted to go with Oregon on this. I ended up going with UCLA for mainly two reasons. One, I've doubted UCLA a lot, and they've proven me wrong. I think they're looking like a very good team, depending on how this season plays out, especially this week. I think they could make a run at the playoffs. I don't know if they end up making it in, but I do think it's a very talented team. But on the flip side, Oregon is also very talented. A lot of people counted them out because they got crushed by Georgia. But let's be honest, it's you know Natty Championship Georgia and week one. So, kind of miscued the statistics and the thoughts about Oregon a little bit. But the second reason I went with UCLA is because I knew you two were going to pick Oregon, and somebody's got to take one for the team and avoid the jinx when it's a close game like this. So I'm taking UCLA.
All right, Slade, you're in your brand new jersey. Who are you taking?
Yeah, I agree. I think that Oregon is definitely going to be able to keep this close this weekend. UCLA is coming out with a 6-point favorite or something like that, I think. But just to mix it up for George, got the
Yes,
UCLA T-shirt
sir.
Oh
on,
my God.
ready to
Yes,
go.
sir.
I knew. It was
He's
coming.
been waiting for that all week.
Yeah.
All
I'm going to take Oregon at home. I think Coach Lanning has really turned his team around. He's got them to focus after getting throttled by Georgia. They've played in a lot of difficult environments up to this point in the season, a lot of difficult games. They had BYU at home, who was on a hot streak at that point. They went on the road at Washington State, a hot streak. They played a lot of games that in the past tend to bind them up. The Washington State on the road. They played at Arizona. Whenever they travel to any Arizona school, they always seem to struggle. So now it's going to be interesting to see how we respond to a very good UCLA team coming into our house. College game days there. I think the environment is going to be off the charts. I am excited to see this game. But I think UCLA definitely has an amazing team. DTR at quarterback has really grown over the 4 years that he's been there. I think it might even be 5 years he's been there. He's gone from somebody that probably should have never been starting in college football to somebody who you could easily throw his name in with the Heisman conversation at this point. He wills that UCLA offense to victories. This is going to be a great offensive mind shootout with Chip Kelly and Coach Willingham. So I am very excited to see this game. I hope Oregon wins. But UCLA, it might be UCLA's time to shine here finally. They've struggled as a program for years, and so this is their chance to prove that they are back.
I just want to say, like, before the season started, when we got news of UCLA and USC moving to the Big Ten in 2024, we kind of joked around like, "Oh, you're not really going to want to come here," like, yada yada yada. And both of these teams have kind of came out and been like, "No, we're ready." Like, I don't think they play Big Ten style football, but they've definitely shown that they are very talented teams, and that when that time comes, they should be ready to compete. So
Yeah, I mean, if only UCLA could sell some tickets.
yeah.
But it is time for the Jack Wagon Sports Game of the Week for Week 8. Okay, somebody forgot to put the right video clip in there, so we're just going to go without it. But the game of the week is Syracuse at Clemson. This will be the
It
12
looks
p.m.
great,
game
though.
on ABC.
Yeah.
Clemson opens as a 14-point favorite. The over/under is at 49.5. Nick, let's go with you first.
Yeah, so I had to go with Clemson on this. We had talked about previously, some of the holes that we thought Clemson had. We kind of talked about it a little bit earlier, how they've shored up some of those holes and really might only have 2 or 3, specifically for me on the defense. DJ, I'm gonna try to pronounce it here without sounding it out. DJ Uiagalelei.
There you go.
Yes, sir. He's kind of proven me wrong, proven you wrong, George. He's looked very decent the past couple weeks, and really the defense, in my opinion, if the defense can get up to where we expect and where they want the defense to be, this could be a very dangerous team going into the playoffs. If if something happens and they end up having to make it.
Slade?
Yeah, so I think that with picking Clemson as my upset alert, I picked cash out for Syracuse at +13. I'm gonna go opposite of you guys. You guys picked your upsets and then went against them in the picks, but I'm going with Syracuse in this game. I think that Syracuse is gonna be able to go into Clemson, and I think they're gonna be able to get a win. I think it's gonna be close. I think that it's gonna end up being a field goal at the end of the game, or maybe a missed extra point by Clemson or something like that that ends up getting this win for them. But I think that Clemson's defense has just needed to step up all season, and they haven't been able to. And at some point, one of these high caliber offensive teams is going to be able to capitalize on it. And I think Syracuse gets that done this weekend.
Yeah. I put a lot of effort into this video, and I finally got it to work. So we're going to show the proper video now. And then I worked too hard on that.
Oh yeah, those videos get better and better every week, honestly. Like, and the music choices are always on point. So.
But so for my pick, all that hard work, just to pick Clemson, I think I've dogged on them enough this season. Uiagalelei has really taken a step forward from last year. I was going to show a lot of film in that, but that was a lot of effort to go through this week. I think Syracuse. Like
George put all that film together last week to just for Penn State's defense, just absolutely shit the bed. I was like, they didn't watch it. If they would have watched the podcast, they might have done a little better.
Yeah, there's another $1 for you.
Michigan watched it.
Yeah, Michigan
watched. They're like, you know what? This guy's onto something here.
Yeah. Their tight end blocking was on point last week. But no, I think Syracuse is heavily underrated. I think they're a lot like Kansas. They're just not getting a lot of respect right now because they're not supposed to be good. They're not a perennial, ACC contender. The winner of this has a clear track to the ACC championship game. Clemson has a pretty easy ACC schedule the rest of the year. The only tough game is Notre Dame, but again, that's not in conference. Syracuse, I think, has a few bumps coming up, but if they can go on the road to Death Valley and handle Clemson, they absolutely have the momentum, everything they need. Again, they play Notre Dame coming up as well to make a run towards the ACC championship game. I think this is going to be a great game. It was difficult for me to decide, but again, I think Clemson just has a little bit too much going for them on offense. Their defense, I definitely still have questions about. I think this is high scoring. I think it goes back and forth, but I think Clemson's able to have the advantage, especially with them being at home. So I'm going to go with Clemson at home and in a close game. Again, I think 14 points is a little too much to give Clemson. just from the way they played, the way they let opponents play here the last few weeks. That will do it for week 8 of Out of the Tunnel, presented by Jack Wagon Sports. Thank you all so much for checking us out. We really appreciate it. Don't forget to like and subscribe to our YouTube. Turn your notifications on so you guys know when we go live every week. We have a Facebook up now, our Twitter and Instagram that has our link tree in it to get to everything else. So go check that out as well. We will be back on Thursday with our regular Jack Wagon Sports podcast. So make sure you guys are checking that out as well. And we will be back next week for week 9, which is setting out to be an equally exciting week for college football. So go enjoy your day. It's going to be a beautiful day for college football. I'm going to a Coonhound Festival because that's what rednecks do. Go enjoy your Saturday. Have a
Wearing
great
the
notice
correct
all the-
apparel.
Yeah, I was gonna say if we didn't notice the Dale outfit.
have a great day, and we will see you guys in the next episode.
See ya.